Welcome to this explainer. Look, if you've ever packed up your life and moved across borders for your career, you already know it is a massive accomplishment. But as any focused learner in an international environment quickly realizes, securing the job is really only half the battle. Thriving in a totally different corporate culture, especially when you're navigating a second or third language, is a completely unique challenge. So today, we're taking on the role of your career mentor. We're going to unpack some highly effective strategies for gaining confidence and contributing effectively in foreign corporate environments, drawing on some powerful insights from a recent discussion about international career building.
So let me ask you something right out of the gate. Do you ever feel incompetent just because of your accent or, because you can't find that perfectly polished word fast enough? In our source material, we hear this really compelling story about Miguel. He's an automation engineer from Colombia who's been working in Frankfurt, Germany for the last 3 years. Now, Miguel's German is actually really solid, but he confessed to struggling deeply with the corporate culture there. Specifically, he feels intense intimidation about speaking up in meetings. He's carrying around this heavy, constant fear of making a mistake and being judged as incompetent purely because German isn't his native language. If you've ever felt that way, trust me, you are absolutely not alone. Let's dig into this.
Section 1. The Expat Dilemma. Confronting the Inner Critic.
What Miguel is dealing with here is actually a very specific, highly potent flavor of imposter syndrome designed just for international business. It's this paralyzing anxiety that every tiny grammatical slip-up or moment of hesitation is going to be interpreted by your colleagues as a lack of professional skill. But the source material gives us a brilliant reality check right here. You really shouldn't be so self-conscious about your language skills. Think about it. If your second language, like Miguel's German, is even half as good as your English, you are likely speaking it way better than the vast majority of locals could ever speak your native tongue.
Plus, the source delivers a pretty blunt but honestly reassuring truth. A lot of these worries, they're completely invented by our own insecurities. The reality of corporate life is that people are incredibly wrapped up in their own issues. They're stressing about their own deadlines, their own presentations, their own overflowing inboxes. They literally aren't sitting there meticulously dissecting your comments or judging your accent. They're just trying to get through their day, same as you. Okay, let's dive into this next part. Section 2. The Mindset Shift. Contribution over image.
This right here is the core paradigm shift you need to actually thrive. When we feel insecure in a meeting, it's so easy to fall into the trap of what the source calls optimizing for image. It's almost like taking yourself out of your own body to watch yourself speak. You start hyper-analyzing how you look, how you sound, and you end up talking just to try and sound smart. We need to completely flip that script. We need to start optimizing for contribution. When you optimize for contribution, you stop worrying about your prestige and focus entirely on adding value to the team. And honestly, less is usually more. Keep your points interesting, keep them brief, and stop worrying about how you're being perceived. Just focus on the actual problem you're all trying to solve.
Section 3. The Ultimate Hack. The Power of Data. So how do we practically make that shift when the meeting actually starts? We use the ultimate hack, objective data. The source shares this absolutely brilliant quote from Jim Barksdale, the former CEO of Netscape and executive at AT&T. He used to say in meetings, "If we have data, let's look at the data. Otherwise, if we're going with opinions, let's go with mine." It's a real game changer. Because think about it, in business, when people just throw out their opinions, those opinions quickly get tied to their identity. Ego gets involved, and suddenly the meeting is a political battle about who is right rather than what's the best solution. Data entirely neutralizes that dynamic. So here's your actionable 3-step strategy for your next meeting, so you never have to sit there in silence guessing what to say. First, check the meeting topic in advance. Second, do a little homework. Find some relevant data, an interesting case study, or a factual anecdote. And third, just show up and present that information in a totally unemotional, objective way. You don't need to deliver some grand, charismatic speech. You just need to bring the facts.
So the crucial point is this. Bringing data is a literal mic drop. When you're the person in the room armed with hard facts, it completely removes ego, emotion, and fear from the equation. That awful anxiety of, do I sound dumb right now, instantly vanishes. Why? Because you aren't leaning on your charisma or a flawless accent. You are simply pointing at the data and drawing logical conclusions. It is hands down the absolute most effective shield against imposter syndrome.
Moving on to Section 4, in the room, being a supportive colleague.
But what about the times when you aren't the one presenting data? Let's talk about interpersonal dynamics. Your main goal in any meeting should be to be seen as a highly supportive, additive colleague. The source outlines some rapid-fire tactics for this. 1. Never interrupt others. 2. Listen actively and acknowledge good points. 3. If you disagree, don't be confrontational. Ask respectful questions like, have you thought about this? 4. Actually compliment your colleagues out loud. Say, that's a really interesting point. And finally, just nod your head to visibly show you're engaged. These might seem like small gestures, but they show deep respect and build massive goodwill with your peers.
Section 5. Life outside the office. Building your support network.
Let's zoom out from the boardroom for a second, right? Because thriving at work isn't just about what happens between 9 and 5. It's deeply tied to your life outside the office. If you're actively trying to level up your language skills to feel more confident, you have to find an immersion method that actually works for you. The source shares this fascinating anecdote about someone who fluently mastered Polish, then German, and then English. Their secret? They just watched a massive amount of native television. It's a great reminder that binge-watching TV is officially a valid professional development strategy. It immerses you in the culture in a way that feels engaging and natural, not forced like a textbook.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how it connects your personal happiness to your professional confidence. You got to find your people. Moving to a new country can be incredibly isolating, and that isolation breeds self-doubt that bleeds right back into your performance at work. The advice here is explicit. Step out of isolation. Join local expat communities. Make friends. Be as social as you possibly can. Building that strong personal support network isn't just nice to have. It's an absolute requirement for your professional mental health. You need spaces where you can just relax, speak freely, and feel understood.
And finally, Section 6. The reframe. Embracing your unique background. And this brilliantly illustrates our ultimate takeaway today. Changing how you view your own identity in the workplace. It is time for a complete reframe. As an immigrant, an expat, or a non-native speaker, you have to realize that your unique background is a profound professional asset. It's not a deficit. The source explicitly points out that international hubs in countries like Germany are highly pro-immigration precisely because diverse perspectives are what drive innovation. You bring a fundamentally different worldview to the table. You solve problems differently because you've lived differently. Oh, and like the source notes, you probably have a really cool accent. So never be self-conscious about the diversity you bring. Own it as your competitive advantage.
We've covered a lot of ground today, from silencing that inner critic and bringing hard data to meetings, to becoming an additive colleague and building a vibrant life outside of work. But I want to leave you with one final provocative question to reflect on before your next day at the office. What unique perspective are you currently hiding from your team out of fear? Stop optimizing for image, start optimizing for contribution, and let your unique voice be heard. Thank you for joining us for this explainer, and keep learning.